Hello, and welcome to something new in my world of podcasting. I am going to try to do a podcast with video that you can watch. And so, suppose I need to explain a few things first. What is this goofy thing on my back? Well, that is my pack. I've talked about it. Let's see if I can, there we go. It's got a jug hanging off a crossbar, one on each side. And what it forces me to do is it forces me to keep my core tight. I realized that on a hike, I was doing a cross-country hike, and I realized that I got a much better workout when I was, I got to find the best way to hold this. I got a much better workout when I didn't have my hiking sticks. My hiking sticks would add time. I could hike faster with hiking sticks, but I realized that the hiking sticks were taking away from me the work of balancing my pack. And balancing my pack was the work that was working on my core. The hiking sticks were working on my arms. And so I determined that perhaps it was a better opportunity for me to, I'm also using a remote mic, and so I don't know the quality of that or if I made a mistake. So sorry about that, I had to check. So I realized that the hiking sticks were working my arms, and but they were taking away from me the work of my core, balancing my body. Now once I realized that, I realized for a hike, then it just depends on where you're hiking and what your goals are. When you need to put on miles, you go ahead and you augment it with your arms. And when you can aren't under a rush, then you can work the core. And that was kind of cool. But the thing that it triggered in this crazy mind of mine is that I realized that the reason why the pack made my core tired is that I had to balance against it. And so I thought, well, that makes sense. I've added a lot of weight, and so instead of having to balance my, instead of taking just my body and keeping it straight, I had to keep the extra 30, 35 pounds level. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. But what could I do to magnify it? Well, what you could do to magnify it is that you could have something that would swing and would pull further. So if you move forward, it pulls you, even the inertia pulls you further forward. And so it forces you to walk as carefully as you can. And each time that you move in a direction, these arms that I have, these weights, pull me further in that direction. And so I have to pull back. But the thing that I think magnifies the workout is that I don't get to just lean against it. So if I were to lean against a regular force, that regular force would tend to just work my muscles in one direction. But I have to pull back against the swing of the pack, just the perfect amount. And that perfect amount is the amount which stops it from it going too far, but not that starts it in the opposite direction. And so my body has to hold my core in. It can't just pull. Like lifting weights, you just lift. But this is a controlled lift where you have to relax the muscles exactly the same amount that you're holding the muscles. And that turns out, I think, to magnify the workout. And I wish now at this point I could tip the camera down and open up my shirt and show you my six-pack and say, wow, look at how well it's worked. But I'm not to that point. but I do tend to notice the difference. I got to switch directions on my camera because my arm has to hold. I realized something. There's a little screw on the end of my, whatchamacallit, my selfie stick, and I need to put weights on it so that I can have a balance. That'll be an improvement for the future. So anyway, that is to tell you why I have a goofy looking pack on, and the reason why I'm making a video podcast is not so that you can sit home and vicariously pretend you're walking. You know, if you've listened to my regular podcasts, you know that the thing that I want most is to be walking with you. When I get to meet with people and take a walk with them, that is my absolute favorite form of conversing. And there was a peripatetics. Socrates or Aristotle? One of them. I think it's Socrates. Boy, I don't know. I have to look it up and review that. But he made his students walk with him. And that's why they were called, there's a whole, look it up, it's a peripatetic school of philosophy. And the peripatetic school of philosophy, now, when you look it up in Wikipedia, it will tell you the tenets of their philosophy, but that's incorrect. The tenet of their philosophy was that you couldn't properly discuss things unless you were walking around. And that seems, it seems fascinating to me that when Jesus came, he embraced that. He seemed to think that the proper mode of being together with his disciples was oftentimes wandering. He wouldn't refuse to talk. It didn't go well for him, but he wouldn't refuse to talk in a synagogue or some static place. But the thing that we see him most doing is wandering around. And so I see myself as a peripatetic. And my podcast being as often as I can on the road is my goal is to find a way to connect with you while you're out living your life. But I am, unfortunately, or fortunately, there's a mix of reasons why I often end up having to make my podcast while I'm driving instead of walking, because the good part is that often my walk gets filled with people, and I don't think I have ever, and I don't want to, it's certainly my goal, is never to say, oh, I can't walk with a real person because I have to record. But since oftentimes I am on the road driving, I decided that I could offer, for those of you who have some reason why you are not out walking and have time and place where the way you want to interact is on a video, you could listen to my podcast and watch. And part of that is that it is absolutely spectacular right now. My favorite season by a lot is fall. And even though we don't have the reds of the maple tree, still the bright yellows and the sun and the woods opening up, hopefully is something that you can take some pleasure in. Which brings me to my topic. No, nothing connects to my topic today. That's something that in my brain, I guess. But yes, it brings me to my topic today. And my topic today is self-interest and laying up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I don't know why there seems to be a real reluctance to accept in most versions of the church that I have attended. I guess the ones that I'm most familiar with are the evangelical church, the charismatic church, and the Catholic church. I'm often in Lutheran churches right now, but I'm the guy doing the talking. And as the guy doing the talking, I don't always know what it is they believe. All I know is that they keep listening to my stories. So in that experience, which is fairly limited, although I don't know where I would put myself. I think I've been involved with quite a few churches and quite a few different modes of Christian thought, but I have never encountered the idea that Jesus had laid out for us a motivation for following him, and that motivation was to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. That the ultimate security comes with us having our efforts preserved for us for the longest time in the most safe place. Now, I have heard people sort of a health and prosperity gospel, but the interesting thing to me is that the health and wealth gospel talks about laying up for yourselves treasures, specifically here. The ability to harness the miraculous power of Jesus Christ to having a good life on earth. And that seems to be a version of accepting self-interest, but tying it in completely a wrong way. So, like I said, my church experience has been with people who somehow aren't okay with your motive for following Christ, your motive for being good, is to lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Converting your currency of earth into heavenly currency. Well, it's first there is the idea of self-interest. And we see that as selfishness or self-centeredness. And it's like, well, that isn't a problem of the focus. Self-centeredness is a problem of what you define as yourself. So when you're, let's say, about 2, you become aware of yourself. Prior to that, you are totally self-centered because you aren't aware of anything but yourself. Okay, so it's somewhere around 2, you become aware that you are yourself and others aren't. And so your awareness of self leads to a self-centeredness, a selfishness. And yeah, I agree with you. That's not a good thing. So if Jesus preached to 2-year-olds that they ought to be self-interested, they're wrong. And if Jesus preaches to 58-year-olds who are trapped in a concept of pleasure in the shortest dimension of time, he's also wrong. But the problem is not that you're being self-interested. It's not the problem of acting to benefit yourself. It's a problem of what you see as yourself. And so when Jesus says, okay, I want you to lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. No, he doesn't say it that way. He tells you that it's an opportunity for you. It's not him saying, I want you to lay up for yourself treasure. It's him saying, this is an option. You can lay up for yourself treasure in heaven. And, I think it's true that being self-interested in the proper time frame is indistinguishable from being good and being reciprocal. So the most self-centered thing that I could do was to love my wife sacrificially. I'll use that word because I have in other podcasts made a point of separating self-sacrifice from self-immolation. Okay, I don't just destroy myself. I let go of a very precious version of myself to embrace a version of myself that my wife was part of. So, like I said, it turns out that being self-interested in the longest term, so laying up for myself treasure in heaven, that's another way of saying it. That's the infinite dimension. So saying I am purposing to be self-interested in a dimension that reaches beyond time is the same as wanting to be good. But the motive, it's somehow like we thought that, well, we shouldn't tell people that they should be self-interested. We should tell them that they somehow have to want to do good and be good for the sake of goodness. And it becomes, I think it has become, this ugly caricature of goodness. That we have to choose to be good or to be self-interested. And yes, we do when we're two. We do when we have a bad picture of the self. I totally agree. If we have an infantile vision of ourself at any age, then we are foolish to pursue it. It won't lead to our happiness. But when we have the right picture of self, then pursuing what is best for ourself, the treasure that we would have for ourself, which would last in a dimension of eternity, is precisely the goodness which God desires. But I think it's anchored. Okay, that's all foundation to what I was thinking about this morning. Because one of the frustrating things about being connected with churches of various kinds is that they don't seem to act like their goodness. I talked about it. It's like you got to be good for goodness sake. That's what they act. That somehow you need to reach out because of what you're doing. It has to be a selfless reaching out. It has to be disinterested when you help other people. And as a result, they don't do it very often. I mean, I struggle against feeling critical. But, I mean, one of the things that you would do if you want people to come to your church is you would make it easy for them to be there. You would prioritize the things which would get people there. And it's a little frustrating to me that my dad now doesn't have transportation. We're hoping to get him back so that he's driving, but for now, it's the right choice for him to not drive for fear that he'll fall asleep and end up meeting a car in the opposite lane. Well, That seems to me that this is a moment when the church, which he has been a part of for a long time, might step in and say, hey, we'll come get you. But their answer has been, well, okay, Jeremy has to bring you. Almost, I don't know. I don't want to accuse them of this. Sometimes it feels like they're hoping that somehow, that my having to bring him will force me to attend or coerce me in some way to attend. I don't know if that's their thought. So that, it's like, well, we could get 2 people here for the effort of 1. And my reasons for not attending are varied, but most of the time, my reasons for not attending is that I have something else, typically something else that I see as laying up for myself treasure in heaven that I have to do at the same time that I could have, that I could attend. Okay, so then added to my list is delivering my dad to their service. Okay, am I a little frustrated? Yes. So I'll admit it. Do I think that frustration suggested the question? Yes. Do I think it's an invalid question? No, I actually think it's a pretty interesting question. So the question that I have, and as I look at this, it's like, why wouldn't the church see this as their opportunity to have a something to do that would benefit them and benefit my dad, that they could see this as laying up for themselves treasure in heaven? And I realized something. So I have talked long and complicated podcasts about how I don't really think, at least I tend to question, whether it's ever safe to organize. So I have a fundamental problem with organization, especially when it ties to something with spiritual dimension or eternal dimension. And suddenly I realized there could be the answer. Because we see this all the time in the world. My kids hate collaborative projects. And my kids are great at collaborating. But their school teacher tells them, hey, we've got to have a collaboration. You got to work with the team of people. You'll all get the same grade regardless of what you did. And so the hardest workers among you are going to be taken advantage of. And the lazy ones among you are going to get a free ride. And the school has done this. They went to business, and business said, yeah, we need people who can collaborate. And the school said, oh, great. This is the way in which we load on. The schools are desperate to have kids pass. And they don't seem, often, it doesn't seem like they care whether the kids are learning the material or learning the life lessons. They simply want to make sure that the kid has a score that justifies them saying, we graduated 98% of our class. So, collaboration, which is valuable, got harnessed to an equity system of saying, well, those of you who are smart, and even worse, I mean, that'd be fine. If we just harnessed smart people, that might be justifiable, because intelligence seems to be very little you can do to improve it. But the really powerful combination is intelligence with conscientiousness. And so collaboration tends to load the work onto the people who are conscientious and intelligent. And we can take their scores and pass them, even them out across a group, which is seen as a really good idea. However, if you look, like if you were to analyze it deeply for at least 5 seconds, you would begin to suspect that it might actually dishearten people. There might be people who would say, and not the far extremes, the super intelligent, very conscientious person is going to dutifully buckle down and get their work done and do the work of the whole group, okay? But the people in the middle of the bell curve, and there are some people who are, okay, on the opposite side of the distribution. There's some who will never care enough to do it. And their reasons, maybe their personality, or get this, their reasons might be that they're going through a whole lot of chaos and hell every night just to survive. And they get to school and it really doesn't matter to them whether they have anything. Okay? So those are the ends of the distribution. But who are the people in the middle? Well, the people are in the middle are the people who are somewhat intelligent and less so, and somewhat conscientious and less so. But it's possible that those people in the middle are actually incentivized to give up because their effort is going to be distributed across the whole group. And suddenly, the claim that we could organize Christians, that we could make an organization in which we would be far more effective. And so that's what we ought to do. We ought to get everyone together and not invite our neighbor over for breakfast once a week. We should have a men's breakfast once a month where everybody comes. No, I'm not too opposed to men's breakfast, except that's the that's the event that no one thought to give Dad a ride to, and I wasn't able to. So, is it possible that all of the benefit of the organization that brings all these people together was canceled out by something different than I realized before? It could be that it's canceled out by the idea that somehow laying up for yourself treasures in heaven is corporatized. And so if we have an organization, the person who actually calls, makes an arrangement for the guy who can't drive, gets him to the breakfast, has to put all of his effort into the common pool. And those who got up early to make the breakfast put all of their effort into the common pool. And the people who made sure that the church had a kitchen and it was clean, they put their effort into the common pool. And the person who just showed up and ate pancakes or biscuits and gravy or whatever they're having gets to take his share. It's a collaboration. And in that collaboration, if we are laying up for ourselves treasure in heaven, which we don't even talk about, but if we collaborate to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven, then who gets the treasure? It's like this is undermining the motivation of self-interest. So not only do we not talk about the self-interest as a motivation, but our organization undermines the possibility that we would. So even if the Holy Spirit gave you a sense when you go and you love your neighbor at some cost to you, and the Holy Spirit meets you, and it's one of the most meaningful things you could do, try it. You probably have. But if you can really not think of it, try doing something without telling anyone in your faith group. Try ministering to someone who you are the only one who knows that they need your help. And I think it's like you will have laid up for yourself treasure in heaven, and I think that you will find it intensely meaningful. You will find that meaning, and it will be deep deep meaning for you. And so even if the church isn't preaching the motivation of being self-interested, I think that the organization might very well be canceling it out. Now, admittedly, just like in my son's math class or my daughter's English class, there are a few people who are way out there on the spectrum who are intelligent and conscientious, and they'll do the project for everyone. So the same thing exists at church. And, you know, I'm not the only one who's noticed that churches really load work onto a few people. And those few people, I think, are laying up for themselves treasure in heaven. But they're destroying their motivation. And there's a whole lot of people who think it's a pretty good deal to have someone else do the work, and they get the benefit. We're going to find out that there's not a lot of treasure in heaven with their name on it. So, should you criticize your church and ask your pastor a bunch of hard questions? No, I don't think so. Although, if you would like to have him listen to this podcast and respond to me, I would love that. Okay? Please do that. But what I would suggest for you is just the excitement of listen to your Lord. Do what he says, and you will find meaning and purpose. This is how you take off the pack. And there we go. Meaning and purpose for your life and joy. So there's my pack hanging up. And here is the beautiful day. All of my stuff laying out in the yard, waiting for the snow to cover it up so I can ignore it until next year. And see if I can get this picture. Oops, it tips that way. There's my dog waiting to greet me. So, thank you for joining me on this podcast. I would love for you to contact me. My email attached to this podcast is stands for Unemployed Idealist, uipodcast@proton.me. Let me know what you think. And if you've enjoyed this, please encourage others to listen to the podcast and see if they could enjoy what I have to say. There should be an audio version that will go up with some correction, with some sound editing that might be a little easier to listen to. That should be on my Unemployed Idealist podcast. But if you like the video format, I'm glad that I tried this today. Please let me know, because I don't know whether I'm going to keep doing this or not. So, my signature send-off is happy trails to you until we meet again.